follow Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio on Facebook.com/Oak 93.5. Or you can engage in conversation by calling 919-899-9305. Once again, each and every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. right here on Oak 93.5.
Peace to the elders, the ancestral giants. Peace to gods and goddesses past, present, and future. Peace to kings, queens, and royal families all over. And peace to you, brothers and sisters. You're tuned into Oak 93.5 FM Africans United. Know Thyself, Black Power Radio. Today we're building on the essence of the African personality, genetically, historically, and culturally. As always with us, we have the Honorable Brother Ausar, man.
Anakasar, a BB for Hodier, African liberation, black liberation, African power, black power. For every black man, woman, and child on the planet, we are the original people. I am the original man. I am a son of Africa. Peace, family.
And I'm honored to welcome back my queen, our queen, Dr. Kimberly Muktarian.
Well, thank you, Brother Escents. It's a pleasure to be back in the company of the brethren and those who drop wisdom and nuggets and protect our community, not just physically, but mentally. And so thank you for having me back. I just want to say to the listening audience that you are in for a treat, and it is time for us to move forward. Why? Because it is time for us to come from the back and begin to lead where we originally originated.
Yes.
Right. I'm Brother Essence Divine, and of course, we have our elder, our grandmaster teacher, Dr. Elijah Milkle, better known as Baba Ahmose.
I'd like to have in our memory that this is the 100th year of Black history. That struggle continues. And for those who do worship, Ramadan Mubarak. And I would also like to say that somewhere I read that there is a balm in Gilead. There is a balm to make the wounded whole, and there is a balm to heal the sin-sick soul.
Mm-hmm. And we're exploring what we mean by African personality, not as a stereotype, but as a way of being in the world rooted in our history, our spirituality, and our genetics. Now, before we get into the question, I want to start with Brother Ausar to set the tone for us. Why is Know Thyself urgent for our people right now?
Know Thyself has always been urgent from us from the beginning, because it basically connects us to the motherland, Africa, our original homeland, and where humanity has started. All knowledge historically originates from Africa and gets its beginning from Africa. When we're talking about philosophy, psychology, engineering, mathematics, language, just about anything we could think about, agriculture. When we know ourselves, what it does, it empowers us and it helps us to understand who we are as a people, our African culture, our African history, our ancestors, and basically how brilliant they were to be able to, chart the stars, right? And to be able to come up with spiritual systems that will enhance our knowledge and our growth and teach us unity and things that were necessary in order for us to thrive and survive. And, they were very successful for tens of thousands of years. And I think that we need to take that into account, because when we look at our short history over here, over 400 years, it doesn't even compare to the thousands and thousands of years that we were able to lead the planet Earth in knowledge and in basically all the sciences of the earth. So to know thyself is to understand the unification of African people and how important that is. We like to say Ubuntu or Ubuntu. I am because we are, therefore I am, which is basically dealing with a collective consciousness. Because to know thyself, we have to understand that not only do we have a individual Ba, which is basically the soul, the spirit, the self, but we also have a universal bar. And when we come into the knowledge of self, we understand when we look in the mirror that the individual bar is in excess the universal bar, the universal spirit. So I think that the knowledge of self is one of the main things, that we teach and that we promote with KCSSU. And as you can tell by the name of this show, Africans United, Know Thyself, Black Power Radio.
Yes, sir. Now, let me say this real quick. Let me state this because Brother Ausar, who mentors me, good or bad, let me state that. Now, just kidding with him. But he always tell me that he got a grandmaster teacher, Baba Ahmose. So I'm gonna take this time to get mine instead of getting it from secondhand. Now I get it directly from Baba, if you don't mind that, Brother Ausar.
Yes, indeed.
So one thing he stated, he said, when we got a grandmaster teacher, sometimes we gotta just sit back and listen. So I'm gonna be coming at you with a few questions to Baba right now. So when you say the African personality, what exactly are you talking about, and how different is it from just saying Black people's behavior?
That's a deep question, and the answer to me is, if you have a personality, it is an African personality, for there are no people on this planet who are not African. So what we then have to deal with are the barriers that people put up to determine that they are something else. And those barriers sometimes are based on them perceiving themselves as superior to one another or to other people. So what is this thing called personality? What is it comprised of? What is an African personality, which is really the deep question? It's comprised of our history. It's comprised of our culture. It's comprised of our spirituality. And maybe we'll get to this discussion whether those who consider themselves our oppressors have a spirit as well, and whether that spirit is of Ma'at or of Isfit, because the very ancient ones in the time before time, the Zeptepi, because people on the planet, let me just back up a little bit. People on the planet began in the very beginning of life, maybe even back to Dinkanish, who is Eve in some people's mind. In other people's mind, Dinkanish means thou art marvelous, thou art wonderful. And the oldest living human being on the planet is a Black woman. And all of those brothers who deny the essence of Black womanhood fail to recognize that had it not been for Eve, they would not be here. And, I like to, recognize our creative being on this planet. Okay, so I say that to say, when did we start to try to understand our behavior? When did we start to understand that we have what's called personality? It was in the time before time, in the Zeptepi. So therefore, that which some people claim they have discovered is just rediscovery. They are remembering. They are remembering that which was passed down for many eons and many thousands of years. That's why in the Black community, we always sing about the many thousands gone. And those many thousands gone are us, for we exist in our ancestors. And our children exist in us, and our children's children will exist in us. So that is the line from which we understand an African personality. For I am my grandparents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents. And the only way that that's not manifest is through denial. And I can't deny them. And there are some people on this planet who have denied their personality. So when we break it down, we can look at culture. We can look at things like music and dance, and we can look at ideas of knowledge and lack thereof. So those are the things that contribute to personality. Also, a very important component of personality are the relationships we form. whether those relationships are organizational relationships or interpersonal relationships. Relationships like relationships to our children. I would submit for your consideration that children can change your personality.
Yes.
Just we think that we're giving them personality, but they come back at you because this whole thing is a circle.
Yes.
What goes around, sure enough, comes around.
Yeah. Okay. How much of that is cultural or learned, and how much do you see as rooted in our genetics or historical experience as African people?
There is very little difference between what we get in our genes and what we then transmit into cultural. We talk about epigenetic transfer. We talk about taking that which we get from our parents and our grandparents, and that genetic material is then modified by the environment in which we live. For those people who wish to be successful in life, then a need fulfilling environment is necessary. That is the struggle, for instance, of African people. We are trying to provide an environment where we can maximize our personality development, and the enemy is trying to minimize our development and reframe what is success and reframe what it looks like to be almost human and non-human. So genetically, we receive the material not only from our parents, but our ancestors. That's why I'm talking about as an unbroken line back to the very beginning, and we receive this material. And if we provide a nurturing environment, and let me back up and say, even when we don't have a nurturing environment, that genetic material helps us to overcome and struggle to outmaneuver those who would take all that we have from us and tell us the reason we don't have it is because of our own failings, as opposed to setting up a systemic system to prove to themselves that they are superior, even though, if truth be known, they must understand that superiority is their mental unwellness.
Speaking of
What a wonderful definition. Could you say that part again, Baba? The last part, please. Thank you.
Unwellness.
Not superiority, just
Not unwellness. There is a question that one has to address when one looks in the mirror and sees a lack thereof, and how do I prove to someone that I am better? The only way that I can prove that I am better is to teach them that they are less. And if you are the originators on this planet, then everything that they have as a result of being us.
True indeed. Let me ask Dr. Kim. So where do you see African personality showing up, and how it relate to how we heal or break down?
well, I think anything healthy can heal itself, and I think for the most part, is the concept of understanding who we are, and that we have the genetic makeup of having divinity. And divinity says that we are essentially high functioning beings. If we are living anywhere below that, it is because it is a learned behavior. I certainly want to say how important it is for knowing thyself to be the very foundation as to why or what it is that we are, and not trying to become. And I think for the human genome, we shouldn't be striving to be anything but accept who we already are. And I think for the most part, we have been in a culture where someone is always trying to dictate to us anything other than. And so we're either trying to obtain or assimilate or purchase some type of value or some kind of illusion of inclusion, as I would say, or illusion of intellectualism. when the truth of the matter is, we come in this world fully loaded. We come in this world not needing anything but to just accept and develop what we already are.
That's nice. That's nice.
Yes, yeah, and I like that because basically, that's dealing with the knowledge of self, through a natural process
Yes.
of, getting it, from your parents and getting it from your community. I have a question for Baba Ahmose, because, I had read, one of the chapters he had written in the book, and it was dealing with, as he spoke about wellness, and it was dealing with health and also healing, the healing process, right? Which I think is important because of, all the things that's happened to us historically, as far as being oppressed, exploited, enslaved, colonized, in Africa and all over. And that is, Baba, what role, how important is it for us to understand the healing process and understanding that mental health, and like you say, wellness, health is the outcome. Wellness is the outcome, and health is the goal. For us to have a healthy mind, I think that a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't understand that the knowledge of self helps us to have a consciousness where we're going to be able to deal with the issues and respond to the issues that we face as a people. So, Baba, can you kind of help us out with the healing process?
Yes.
And wellness is the outcome and health as the goal?
It's all interrelated in the sense that in order to be considered healthy, one should be able to function in this world without the addition of any external, like drugs. Like you shouldn't have to take pills, and the pharmacy should be closed if you are trying to be healthy. It's probably okay to see a healthcare provider in the sense that they have studied the physiology. And my question many times is, if you're only trying to heal the body, are you only half a doctor? And I'm not talking about anybody in particular. I'm talking about all of them. If you have not understood that health also includes the spirit.
Right.
Yes.
So if you have an unhealthy spirit, then it doesn't matter whether your body is well. There are many unhealthy spirits on this planet, but we need to understand that health not only comes from being born, but prior to the process of being born, understand the relationship between mother and child. We talked a little bit earlier about genetics. Well, do we both deal with and understand that the genetics of the mother goes to the child and the child's genetics go to the mother?
Yes.
That's why it's mama's baby, because genetically speaking, DNA speaking, they are a shared unit. Now, fathers are important too, later on. we hopefully have a space.
Yes.
And I think we do. Because culture is important as well. There's an interrelationship between the genetics, the sharing of genes, the consubstantiation between mother and child. They are of the same stuff. I'm getting to cycle of healing. And so the wellness of the mother contributes to the wellness of the child. And the wellness of the child contributes to the wellness of the mother. Therefore, in order to birth a healthy society, let's move this analogy to society, then that society must be well so that the individuals that occupy that society also have a sense of health and wellness. You cannot expect healthy outcomes if you have a health desert, a food desert, if you have oppressors who care not about your well-being. If you live in an oppressive society, you become an oppressed individual, and therefore your behaviors are those of persons who are oppressed. Now, the glory is that because our ancestors continue to provide us with the resources we need to survive, it is a wonder that African people have survived on this planet, given
Yes.
what goes on. So others who have the knowledge look at us and say, what is so special about them? And can we get some of that? And sometimes they come into the community and get one or two of us. And one or two of us go in the other community to be with them. We give up that which is the quintessential essence of survival and thriving and overcoming. Now, brother, you asked me about the cycle of healing and health. Now, when we look at the very ancient people, they said, I made a note because I knew I wouldn't remember it. They said, Haru is it when he rises up with the two heads, one having Ma'at and the other having Isfit, or wickedness. He giveth wickedness to the worker thereof, and Ma'at to him that follows after it. Therefore, the very ancient people in Kemet, because this comes from the Pur Muru, they understood that we could be both Ma'at and Isfit. And what determines whether Isfit manifests itself or Ma'at? These are the questions. If you, as a individual or a group of people, decide that Isfit will provide you what you need in the physical world, and that is more important than what happens to your spirit, then you are Isfitted. And if you fail to understand Ma'at, or fail to have even your offsprings taught about Ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, balance, reciprocity, if they fail to understand divine image, that we are both spirit and physical, and it is our spiritual self that is our higher self. And so if we would go to healing, we must go to healing first to the spirit. And if we see spirit, how do we heal spirit? That is the question on the table.
Yeah. You want to follow up?
Yeah, because I like that, because you know, when he talk about the spiritual healing, in order for us to heal spiritually, we have to develop ourselves spiritually. And I think that that's very important, with the foundation being Maya, as Baba said, truth, justice, righteousness, balance, order, harmony. And I think that it's important, even when you look at our 10 virtues of the initiate. The first one, control your thoughts, which is based off of Maya. And the second one is control your actions. So I think that spiritual development is, you know, the key to the African personality. And I think that once we basically, you know, go back in Sankofa and understand that our ancestors are basically the ones who came up with the concepts of not only spiritual systems, but also religion. So spirituality is at the heart of our development. In order to raise our level of consciousness, we have to have a spiritual consciousness in order for us to truly be spiritually healthy, mentally healthy, and also physically healthy.
Okay. Let me ask you this here. From an African-centered worldview, how did this shape how we move through that cycle compared to a Western approach to therapy or healing?
From an African what?
African-centered worldview or perspective.
Well, I mean, we go from an African-centered perspective. We go to Maya. We had the scales of Maya, so we're able to weigh things based off of the scales of Maya, where the heart has to be just as light as the feather. And what the heart represents is our actions and our deeds. And that's why we are instructed in our teachings to think Maya, speak Maya, and do Maya. And so we have different ways of, teaching, the students and learning that's going to help advance us, which is like the Shetis. And what basically Shetty is, it's a discipline. So there are like 5 different Shetties: the wisdom teachings, which help with the reasoning, the intellect. Then we have meditation, which helps with the focus in the will. And then we have righteous action, which is based off of Ma'at, doing the right thing. And then we have devotional love, which basically is when we're going through the energy consciousness centers, or what some people consider to be the chakras, and we raise our level of consciousness. And one of the most important chakras is the 4th chakra, which is the heart chakra. In order to raise to the 5th chakra, which is the throat chakra, makaru, truer speech, the heart has to be pure to the point where we're not just concerned about our personal affairs, but humanity in essence. And so then you have the 6th chakra, which is dealing with the pineal gland or the 3rd eye. And then, of course, we have the crowning achievement, which is the 7th chakra. So we have systems in place that's going to help to educate us through the Shetties for our spiritual development, because the key is to raise our level of consciousness, because there's different levels of consciousness, and consciousness is the key. And we have a collective consciousness. Basically what that does is makes us successful. Now, as far as from a Western perspective, right, theirs are based off of world domination, power, capitalism, racism, anything to basically have them, on top and have us at the bottom. And one thing that basically I've been meditating on a lot and thinking about a lot is we have to be more concerned with our movements and what we do in order to deal with, the Western world who is against the African world. And it's been shown throughout history, even what's going on today. So their mentality and their philosophy is one more of domination, right? And ours is one more of collective consciousness working together. Remember, in Shetwat Netta enjoins the sharing of the resources. We believe in sharing with one another, not only one another, but with the world as well. And that's why they were so easily to invade Africa and basically, colonize, because we were trusted. But we had to learn from our mistakes. So I think that that's a really good question as far as from an African-centered perspective, as far as, the colonizers, the Western world.
And Dr. Kim, I know you do some work with some youth formerly incarcerated. So I want to ask you, based on how Brother Ausar just said, African-centered is righteousness, harmony, how we move through righteousness and harmony, and then the Western world like more dominating factor. So how do you see this healing cycle playing out in mental health, especially in the youth and the formerly incarcerated?
Well, when it comes to our youth, I think the first thing that we have to do is arrest the lie. Our young people have been served a diet of lies and untruths that refute the African-centered consciousness. So out of survival, they adopt the lie in order to fit into the capitalist society, the Eurocentric, westernized way of doing things. And so they've told themselves that if they do it, and not just our youth, but even our adults, those who are educated, those with degrees, have told themselves if they adopt the Eurocentric way of living, then they'll be better off. So they refute the righteousness, they refute the justice, and they refute anything that is of pure truth. And so if you have that constantly placed before you, then it becomes a very tight, fit game whereby they adopt that as the main narrative. It is essential for our elders to continue to help along the way. Those like, Brother Ausar, yourself, Baba Ahmose, who are constantly helping our young people. The truth of African-centeredness must be as loud, and I don't want to say loud as, just making a lot of noise, but it must be the foundation of not just Africa,
But that's right.
but all humanity, because the lot of Eurocentric behaviors go domineering across the world. It's not just centered here in America or it's not just attacking Black America. It is who they are without an opponent, because this is what they have to believe. And so they spread these untruths, is what I would call them, basic lies. And we have to fight that off. And I'll give you an example as to without an offense, you have to have a defense. And for me personally, I understand the rules of engagement. Just mentally holding our own is a form of warfare. So we have to fight for the minds of our young people. We've allowed capitalism to just carry them away without stopping to say, this is not right. This is dangerous. And let us show you a way of obtaining what you really are supposed to have in this life without having to be a crook, without having to be a criminal, without having to be, it's not okay. And it shouldn't be glorified. So I think we're on the right path to acknowledge.
Right.
But our job is also to defend and protect the ears and the sensitive innocence of our children.
All right, makes sense to me. You want to add in?
I agree with everything the sister said. I think that sometimes what happens when we work with, I'm not just young people, but African people, so many of the people that work with us have no understanding of spirituality. Now they have an understanding of religion as they are being taught. They have an understanding of maybe culture, but when it comes to the deeper being, they want, first of all of us to fit into a structure that is antithetical to our well-being, that is antithetical to our spiritual being. They want us to be first individuals rather than part of a community.
Right.
And even people who cry community want to profit off the word community. Let's be part of the community, but then they're counting their dollars. That it is not only the teachers and preachers who are thieves of the spirit of African people. It is the system itself, the system that decides whether or not you are successful. For instance, in the music and theater industry, we wait for these people with these idols. Idols is the wrong word. These what do you call them? Awards.
Yes, yes.
And these awards are the ones that have been designated to say that what you do is good, as opposed to you making a decision that I do well and I don't need your award to tell me that it was so. So part of that misinformation waiting for that award is to be controlled by who? The awarder. Ain't no such word as awarder, but you know.
It's okay,
sounded like
we
it,
know.
right?
Listen, put it in the dictionary. We'll take it. Okay.
So what we do is we then sacrifice our spiritual self for our physical self, because we become not only spiritual beings who are seeking our higher self within our spirit, but we become physical beings who forget that our spirit is what is our life. And because as we go to healing, we don't search for the healers who are spiritually focused.
Come on.
We search for healers who are physically focused and religiously focused.
Yes.
Now, I am not anti-religion if that's what you want. But what I am saying, if you go to your religion and it does not address your spirit, and your spirit knows, hey, there is something that I write sometimes called spiritual energy transfer. That is spirit speaking to spirit. And if our spirits speak to each other, and lift each other up, then we heal each other. I am not saying that your body doesn't need medicine, but it probably, and I'm not, what's the disclaimer? I am not a physician. But if we make our bodies dependent on medication,
Sure.
if every day we wake up and we have to take the same pill over and over again, it is not what? Healing.
No.
Right.
It is maintaining. If we wake up every day in a racist society, it is not healing. It is maintaining.
That's right.
And it maintains those who wish to keep us oppressed. Now, in the, I don't want to talk too much, but I just say this and stop. If we live in a society that is controlled by the powerful oligarchs, and their intention is to stay on top and keep us on the bottom, and their training in terms of the personality of those who are on the bottom is to believe that the reason that they're on the bottom is not because of the oligarchs, but it's because of their neighbors and their friends and the people who don't look like them and people who are new in the community, and that we fall for the banana in the tailpipe each and every day, and we fail to understand that we are not aspiring to be the oligarchs. We are aspiring to be, as Sheikh Anta talks about the two cradle theory. He talks about the northern cradle and the southern cradle. And in the southern cradle, we are more generous and giving to each other on a physical level, because we live in an environment where we don't have to be greedy because we have in abundance. Whereas in the northern cradle, you have to be more temporally concerned, because if you don't plant on time, you don't eat. And the animals migrate and all of those kinds of things. Whereas in the South, I give my neighbors everything he or she needs because I have plenty. And that determines sometimes your personality.
Right.
I was just throwing in another personality theory. Southern cradle, northern cradle. The fire and ice people.
Right.
Now, Baba, now, pardon me, brother. Now, okay, because I really like this conversation about the African personality, and basically, it takes me, to the realization of something like the school, the prison pipeline, which basically is helping to, keep our community in a bad position, because a lot of our young brothers and young sisters, unfortunately, fall into the trap of the school to prison pipeline. And we know that it's by design. So what this basically lets me know is that the African personality is being suppressed, wherein we are doing things not according to Maya, but things basically that will land us, in getting in trouble with the law. And we know it's by design, but how can we protect ourselves and protect our youth from having to face these type of challenges of suppressing the African personality, where the African personality can't flow naturally within our youth?
That's good.
Self-knowledge, and we must learn to control our culture in the sense of what they hear and what they see. Not control in the sense that forbid, well, as parents, we forbid our children to do a lot of things, but not that we control all that they see, but in all that they hear, but that they hear and see it with knowledge. And that's what epistemology talks about, that there are many ways of knowing. And the most important from a spiritual perspective is intuitive, because intuitive knowledge is transmitted from one generation to the next, from ancestors to their progeny, from parents to their children. That sometimes we know. How do we know knowledge? How do we know something? Because our spirit sings. Our spirit says that this is not the right way to go. And the only problem, if it is a problem with children, is they don't listen to their spirit, or they have not developed sufficiently to be in touch with their spirit, because they'll make decisions and do things without understanding consequences, without understanding the environment in which they live, without understanding that there is a price to pay for decisions that you make, because Ma'at and Isfit exists within all of us. And the question is whether we choose Ma'at or Isfit.
Okay. So, with that question, what practices, rituals, or disciplines from African tradition can help the listeners, me, most of us strengthen Ma'at in our character and relationships?
See, one of the things that I always see in African people is collective behavior, collective responsibility. And the very ancients sometimes, for instance, in terms of health, if someone gets sick, they would bring that person to the middle of the village or town, and everybody would look at that person, and they would then diagnose as a community. If you have people who are acting out, it is a community responsibility that say, what are we not doing in the community, instead of blaming the victim. If we look at our children and we no longer say that it is only the children who have a problem, but it is the community that needs healing.
Come on.
What are we going to do as a community to get better and
Yes.
to provide a place where our children won't have to have these behaviors,
That's
won't
right.
perceive that these behaviors are necessary? That is a more African way, as opposed to saying we're going to lock the children away. If there was a time in the African community historically, there were no homeless children. There was a time in the African community you didn't have to make an appointment to go visit your relatives. There was a time in the African these are African things that existed in my lifetime. There were times in the African community you go visit a relative and they'd never ask you when you were leaving, but could you stay longer?
Right.
There was a time where you didn't have to arrange your meals. Whatever was on the pot or on the table, you were
Right.
shared.
Right.
And you would share with anybody who needed it. You see, but we have learned in some parts of our community to not even like our parents, to think that they are a burden. I always talk about athletes with this. Brother Ausar knows I do. You talk about, well, I'm tired of my people asking me for this, that, and the other. My answer is simple: give back your genes.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to help your people. Give back your genes and see where you are without
Right.
them. And so,
That's
genetically
deep.
and physically speaking, we have to be more community oriented. It's difficult because it entails sacrifice. It entails saying that I am not the most important person in this community, but I am of this community, and I want this community to heal. Begin with the family. I want this family to heal.
That's
I
right.
want a collective responsibility for it. And that begins with self-knowledge.
It really
If
does.
you know yourself and you know who you are and you know whose you are and you know the essential responsibility of you as a temporary custodian in your community, for you will pass on. For the very ancient ones were the first to believe in eternity. They
Yes.
believed that we lived eternally, not the physical form, but the essence of our life
That's right.
is eternal. There is no death except in your mind. And then some other folk came along and said you die. And you can't take it with you. Well, I've been in enough tombs in Kivit to say my brothers and sisters thought they could take some stuff with them.
Right.
And I know I had this conversation with somebody very important to me, and she said, well, you can't take it with you. I said, well, if they didn't think you could take it with you, why they put all that stuff in them? But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that later.
So with so much Isfit in our culture, our music and all, how do let me ask you this differently. Do we see any, or is it any Ma'at, which is truth, justice, righteousness, harmony? Do we see any of that in our culture, musically, entertainment, anything being passed forth right now?
Well, of course. I mean, we're always going to have positive music because that's our nature. One thing I would like to speak on that subject matter right there when you're talking about is fit in music. I really love going to the 10 virtues of the initiate, right? Because our ancestors, to me, were so far ahead of everything with their knowledge because the first principle is control your thoughts, right? And remember we had spoke earlier on the thoughts being based around Maya, right? Truth, justice, righteousness, balance, harmony, order, reciprocity. And unfortunately, and this is why our teachings are so important, the teachers haven't been introduced to a great majority of our brothers and sisters on this planet, right? So basically what we had to do was take on other teachings. And unfortunately, in our communities, we have been taught to glorify things that aren't good for us individually or collectively out of bravado, right? Who's hard, who's tough, who will crash out, who will bust their gun. All of these negative things, right, that are implanted in our youth minds at such a early young age, right, because of the gang explosion in the 90s and things of that nature. So, it's not enough brothers and sisters out here with the knowledge, with the consciousness for us to really make a great impact. And that's why we have mass incarceration of so many of our young black, brothers and young black men. They take a great majority of their lives away from them out here in the so-called free world, right? So that's why, one of the things we believe in at KCSSU is pushing the knowledge of self and really pushing the 10 virtues, because once we really start to understand that first one, controlling your thoughts and what come with it, and Maya, and then we want to make the decisions that lead us to getting in trouble, lead us to incarceration, lead us to black on black crime, where we look at each other as enemies. A lot of these things are glorified through the music, glorified, through shows like Power and other shows that denigrate black people, right? Dehumanize black people, right? And that's why we really have to get serious, because the onslaught is incredible. More of our young brothers are locked up today than any other point in history. And that's why we have to get serious, and that's why these types of conversations are important, because all of these young brothers don't understand the African personality. They might not even heard of the term. Like I say, I started learning while I was incarcerated, right? And, it was really good for me because it helped to change my life and transform me. And like I had stated on this show before, that's why, we started KCSSU while I was on the inside, because we don't feel like our young brothers and sisters should have to go through prison to get initiated into knowledge. They can do it right out
All right
here.
now, come on.
Right, to get initiated
powerful.
to knowledge. And that controlling your thoughts is the key. And number 10, too, have the ability to distinguish the real from the unreal. A lot of our young brothers and sisters don't really understand reality because of these reality shows and things of that nature that lead them astray. So I just think that, our ancestors were so ahead of the game that the first thing they dealt with, right, is mental health. And that is controlling your thoughts. And also through spiritual development.
It's good.
Yeah, that was.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Just in follow up to that, and especially understanding what's real
Yes.
and unreal. How do we know now? I mean, at one point we could say, I can verify because that looks like that person, that sounds like that person. Now we have AI. And
Yes.
how do you tell the difference between the truth and a lie? Because it is not in the best interest of our young people us as a people to know the difference between what's real and what's not real, because that is another mechanism to control.
That is
if
correct.
I can get enough of the people that you admire to say things and you have no information to tell you that person didn't say it, and you do what? You pass it on to all of the people that you know. This is the most dangerous time in terms of information in my lifetime.
true.
And when we talk about personality, and that's the topic, the African personality can be confused by what? Misinformation. And there's so much misinformation out there. Frantz Fanon said, a man who has a language consequently possesses the world expressed and implied by that language. What we are getting or becomes plain. Mastery of language affords remarkable power. If we change the word language to reality, mastery of reality gives us great power. And we are in danger. If we don't get ahead of this with our young folk, it'll be like gangster rap. Some folk might like it. If you're an adult, okay, you can maybe tell. Well, I don't know if that's true either, because I remember, I'm almost finished. I remember when Superfly came out.
Oh.
Me too.
The first movie.
Gee,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
said, oh, it's a movie. Nope. Next thing you know, we were all Superfly, wearing high heels and multicolored clothes and acting a fool and calling women names. That happened before rap music.
Come on.
You see,
Tell
so
it.
it is not only the music, it's the theater, it's the books,
Right.
and now it's the AI lie.
Come on. Wow.
So how do we counter the AI lie? I am really concerned about that, but I'm sorry. I just couldn't get that back.
Yes, Dr. King. Go.
Listen, this is a heated. I know you all out there and listening world are soaking up this knowledge as to where we've come from, but also where we are today. This is very important because while our children may miss the truth that passed us by, it tells us that many of our adults have missed the mark as well. And so we have a duty to go back and recapture what we have lost in plain ignorance or just entertainment, patting our feet and putting on the headphones of. One thing I would say is that when I hear the word music, I also hear amusement, to be entertained, to be amused. And as long as we're laughing and joking and, they got us in a place where we're just so glad to just be in a place where we don't have to take anything serious. That in itself, we start creating societies, especially in the Black culture, where everything is just a joke. If it's not entertainment, if it's not comedy, if it's, we have a podcast, but we have podcasts that all they do is just talk about nonsense. Nothing that's going to provide a foundation for our communities. Nothing that's going to propel us to a place of where people take us serious. This is a ongoing issue that we definitely have to be made aware of, because if all we do is laugh and joke and play, then when do we get to the foundations of who we are as African-centeredness? When do we get to the place where we're talking about spirituality and righteousness and love for each other? Because everything else is just a fallacy. It is very important that we hear today what it means to be African-centeredness, or have a heart where we go back to who we really are. Because America will put a whole casting show in front of us and tell us, if you want to be successful, you got to laugh and joke with us. You got to have a good time while your elites are stealing entire countries. While we laughing and giggling, and getting Grammys and trophies, trying to act like we somebody, they are hijacking countries. Hey, Venezuela. And so, and main resources. because we are not singleness of heart. We don't have any foundation. And all we want to do is survive and smile every once in a while. And that is not, anytime you can tell a people that we have you so enslaved that your only break is to get a laugh every now and then. That is a very crucial place that we have to almost stop and about face, as they would say, so that we can recollect who we are, so we can know what we have lost and what we need to go back and ascertain.
Can I say just one quick word, a sentence?
Please.
We have the power, and it is the power of the Spirit.
Yes.
If you would be quiet, be still, and but listen to your spirit, the ancestors will answer your questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I have something I want to basically speak on right quick, and that is, dealing with the African personality. That's the topic today, and that is a great big part of the African personality has always been to study, to observe, to reflect, to meditate, to build,
Yes.
right, and create. I think that, we have been in a position of being on the defense so long that we, I ain't gonna say we forget, but we, kind of put to the side some of our greatest attributes, because if you're constantly fighting against oppression, right, systemic racism, things of that nature, a lot of times you don't think you have time to build.
That's right.
I think that, we have to really start using our gifts and talents and skills in building, and because we have enough brothers and sisters. I think what's stopping us is confidence. I think that our confidence, has been, messed with, tampered with, and in some cases even destroyed, right? And that's dealing with mental health, and that's
Yes.
why the knowledge of self and the healing cycle, the healing process, is so important. That's the first thing we have to build up, right? Is our knowledge, right, and our spiritual strength, so that we can start doing what's necessary to build. Our ancestors, our ancient ancestors, and even our recent ancestors coming out of chattel slavery were just incredible with their abilities to build.
Yes.
And we have spoken about that on this show many times when you talk about Wilmington, North Carolina,
Yes.
Durham, Tulsa, and all the other places that show our ability to build and create, which shows that our ancestors, even though they might not have, it's always a component of the knowledge of self within us, whether we know it or not, right? And it comes out sometimes, and it came out after, we were set free as slaves as we started building. So I think that that's important, that we gain the confidence, and the way we gain that confidence is through working together, unified effort. We have to work as a unit and not work separate. And then that way we'll be able to do the things. And once we start seeing what we're capable of, right, and then that's when we'll start building even more. Right now, we have a lot of challenges here. We know that this country here, United States, it's a shame that it sits at the head of the table of the United Nations, but yet have more incarcerated people and more crime in this country than any other country on this planet. So I think that right there teaches us one thing, that this is a crimogenic society,
Amen.
right?
That's
That's
so
based off of crime. But what they've done is they've reversed it, like Dr. Ahmose Wilson always say, basically how they have to turn things around in order for them to be dominant, and we have to turn things around in our mind in order to be basically at the bottom of the totem pole. So what we need to do is, in my estimate, is really understand that everything we need, we already have within us. We just have to reactivate our genetic memory bank as far as who we are as a people, so that we can, face the challenges that we have straight on, and not try to basically skirt around the issues. And I also say this, and really it kind of gets to me when I see the genocide, black on black here in the diaspora and also on the continent. But yet we'll say when it comes to dealing with our enemy, that's not our nature. We have a nature of Maya. But when it comes to each other, we'll kill each other. But when it comes to the enemy, we're making an excuse. And I think that, that comes from a lack of confidence and lack of having the warrior spirit that's necessary.
Fear factor.
Yes.
That's a valid point.
Even amongst our young brothers out there in the streets, supposedly to be in gangs and stuff. They got switches and all this stuff. But yet, if they see the man coming there and throw it down, all that's psychological.
Talk about it. Talk about it, Brother Kevin.
We shouldn't be going at each other. That comes from a lack of knowledge of self, right? And it isn't getting any better, right? And it has to get better where we understand the value of black lives, the value of each other, the value that we are brothers and sisters, right? So I think that,
That's
we
powerful.
really have to get serious. And it really, when I see it, and I say, no, we got to change something. We got to change our approach. And that's why I say we have to build.
Well, can I also add, well said, Brother Ausar, that propaganda is a beast machine. And what is pumped out into the frequency of our ears and to our spirit, if we don't have a defense mechanism or have been taught how to defend what comes into our spirit or our ear gates, our children are just sticky pads. They become glue to everything that this society pumps out. So by the time they are told that these certain people, quote unquote white people, are legal, black people are not. You can kill black people. You cannot kill white people.
Right.
Or you could kill white people, but if you're white, you can also be a high-ranking supremacist. So a lot of times people think, well, if you kill another white person, that and I don't want to get off on this tangent, but let me just say, the definitions of Eurocentric behavior is very well, without saying, it operates, with this flow throughout our education system, and they never address the roots, and they can't address the roots because they've capitalized off of the lie. I believe that it is the African-centered way that should address these ideologies, or what do you say, the idiocies of these people. Because that we are the foundation of truth. At the African-centered way, a lot of times people are waiting for legislation to make a decision and some kind of party lines to make a decision. But really, it's only without a legislation or without a law, there is only but one law, and that's love. And we are called genetically and mentally and spiritually to be that example and to be just as demanding that this is the way we should go versus what we should succumb to. It is not an alternative. Love is not an alternative. It is the main goal of it. We don't have a right to kill each other. Now, I know America would tell you, you got a right to kill. You got a right to steal. And they have shown you that. You have a right to destroy, but we don't. And so until those truths are annihilated by us speaking or giving out the truth, then we basically succumb by just not saying. And that is why these arenas are so important, because how many people in this country have adopted this philosophy that it's okay to kill, steal, and destroy, and as long as you wave a flag over it or sprinkle a little nationalism on it, you can kill, 2 little small boats and steal crude oil and put people on reservations and the rest on plantations and mass incarcerations. And before you know it, this becomes your normalcy. And this should never be. those are the outcomes, of course. But it is important that the African-centered way is just as elevated and articulated and pronounced in the earth.
And one thing I did get out of it, I got more than one, but one thing I want to point out that I did get was that Isfit, hatred, shrew, jealousy, all the lower aspects of the mind is also institutionalized.
Yes.
Meaning using politics, schools, media, social media to keep pulling us away from God every day, if that's safe to say.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, I want to just flip a little bit, but still on the African personality of with Baba, when you bring in the human genomics, what does modern genetic science actually tell us about Africans as the original people, and how that shapes the African personality genetically, historically, culturally?
Yeah. Well, before I get to that, and I'm going to go there, is the very ancient ones believed that there was a judgment day. They believed that if your heart was not as light as the feather of Ma'at, that you would pay a penalty. So what we find with the oppressor is that they teach there is no penalty for murdering, killing, stealing, and destroying.
That's right.
And their children are being miseducated. But when Judgment Day comes, the bells will ring and the angels will sing. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, let me.
Yes, it was like, well, you rhyming, but Baba.
When we look at genomics, there is a theory that every being on this planet that calls him or herself human began in Africa, and that those genes were passed down for millions of years. And so when you have an evaluation DNA, you're really looking at how much of Africa remains in you, not how much Greek or Roman or Italian, even though that's the way they present the report. The report should really present, well, you only have a little bit of African left in you. You have a lot more African left in you. The genetic material that you have diluted doesn't change your personality unless you choose to be Isfit. And many people choose Isfit because their concern is only in these what they call in the church earthly rewards, and not heavenly rewards, whatever they may be. The other piece of your genetics is that your genetics can be modified and are modified by your environment. If, for instance, you have a genetic transmission of trauma, and let me say this, it is not only the victims that transmit trauma, but it is the perpetrators.
Okay.
Check this out. I am a racist. I teach racism to my children. I mean, I'm talking about the oppressors now.
Yes,
I know
yes.
you're looking at me, sister. This is not,
I'm
this is not a confession.
No, right. I knew
using-
exactly what
okay,
you were referring
just using
to.
this as an example.
Yes, sir.
Stay with me.
I didn't have my mouth open like
Okay. So I am a racist. I teach my children to be racist.
Mm-hmm.
We act as racists. And I have children, and I transmit that behavioral environment to them. So there is an intergenerational transmission of trauma from the perpetrator as well as the victim. But in this society, from the perspective of, quote, mental health, we only treat the victims. And the perpetrators are the ones who need the
I
treatment.
got to go.
They were afraid of it.
I got. You know what, Baba Ahmose? Let me say this. I often say, I said, well, we are too busy trying to free slaves. We should have been trying to capture master. You know, at the end of the day, it is important that we subdue mentalities that are dangerous. And when they so-called freed slaves, and I won't say that we were enslaved or slaves or one way or the other. What I will say is that because we didn't deal with the oppressor, the day he claimed to let us go was the same day he started preparing to bring us back.
13th Amendment.
13th Amendment. The day he let us go was the same day that he began and constructing the capitalist society that brought us back. Just Raleigh alone, and as a historian, I will say that in 1865, quote unquote, supposedly you let Africans go. But then 1870, they had built their first prison called Central Prison right here in Raleigh. So, and the former slaves built their own prison. Central Prison was built by former slaves.
In
And
1870.
1870, it opened. So immediately, now it opened in 1870, but they started building it as soon as they were released. So if we don't go back and deal with the oppressor, then we'll always have these dynamics or this algebraic equation of bondage or what have you. Because like you said, not only do those who are victimized pass on this trauma, but obviously the way we are even looking at today, those who are quote unquote the oppressors, they look like their forefathers. They look exactly like the pedophiles, the pedophile rings. All of this stuff is not just today. We shouldn't be, I don't want to say we shouldn't be, but we certainly shouldn't be alarmed because they've been doing this ever since we've known them.
And it's a failure of the society to even consider the possibility that the perpetrators are genetically passing on this idea, this is-fitted idea of being oppressors. Genetics is a two-way street. Genes influence our behaviors influence and impact the subsequent genes. There's one term that I found when I was thinking about answering this question, and it's called niche construction, Niche. And this theory is a branch of evolutionary biology that emphasizes the capacity of organisms to modify natural selection and thereby act as co-directors of their own and other species' evolution. Therefore, what they pass on, which is not modified. Now, that doesn't mean that every one of them become what their parents were. If they exist in an environment that helps to modify that behavior, i.e., the sister, less melanated sister, who's giving all that money to the HBCUs,
Right.
Right.
she has deliverables, and she goes back and says Toni Morrison,
Yes.
and that sister pays it forward. So there are ways to modify that, but first you have to accept the fact that it's possible. And some of those who say that they're your friends, when you ask them what's their deliverable, they have no deliverables. Well, did you accept the benefits of your skin privilege? Well, I'm not really taking skin privilege. Did you turn it down? Did you say, no, that's skin privilege? No, I'm not doing. No, you did. You participated in the process, from my perspective.
From our perspective.
So genetics provide the foundation. The environment provides the place for it to grow, like a seed being planted in the soil, and it can grow up and be that which it came from, or it can be modified. Anyway, so that's my position on understanding the genetic contribution to behavior. We look in genetics, many times we're looking for the root cause of disease, and we're looking for the negative impacts. But what we also have to look for are the foundational impacts that move from parent to child, and whether or not that child then can be in an environment that helps him or her grow into a productive member of the African world. Because the truth is, as African people, everyone has the potential to have an African personality, which means the potential to be more Ma'at than Isfit. That is not to say that there are not Isfitted, focused African people, but many times those persons have been what? Miseducated. You know, what did PLO Lumumba say about many of the leaders in Africa?
They thieves.
They're thieves.
Oh, wow.
You know, that's why their people are starving. That's why they're doing wrong. See, I don't want people to assume that when we talk personality and African personality, that it's all bright sunshine and roses,
That's
because
right.
some of our folk have been miseducated, and some of them have willingly been miseducated. Because if you're willingly miseducated and call yourself a capitalist and get you a job, and then you start talking about the sisters, and I ain't calling that brother's name. But anyway.
Right. I have a question, right? I have a question for you, Baba. And that is because, you know, I think that the African personality is necessary for all African people. What role does resistance play in the African personality? As far as dealing with global Eurasian imperialism, or like a lot of people say, global white supremacy?
I think resistance must be studied. Resistance is the beginning of self-knowledge, or the end of self-knowledge. It is connected to self-knowledge. For we have all of these incidents of people resisting being not only made into something that somebody else wanted them to be, but made into hewers of water and drawers of water, as somewhere I read. And their resistance is saying that I am African and I will live African. I'd rather be buried in my grave than live as a slave. So when we look at the history of African people around the world, even under oppression, whatever the form of oppression was, we find resistance. We find resistance in terms of not only physical resistance, but mental resistance, because sometimes we can be miseducated or re-educated, or when I was growing up, they used to talk about, you know, they get you in these re-education camps and brainwash you so they can resist brainwashing, and then we end up with somebody like an African brother called Kwame Nkrumah,
Right.
or an African brother called I don't know, Patrice Lumumba,
Yes.
or African sister called Nzinga, or we end up with African brother called W.E.B. Du Bois, or we end up with an African brother called by the name of Henry McNeil Turner, or we end up with the many thousand gone who were parents and grandparents who sat by the fire and whispered to their children and grandchildren, honey, this is what you have to do in order to live. This is how you take care of the family. This is how you have what is called heir property. Why do you have heir property? Because I always want you to have a place.
Right.
We have struggled. So in our resistance, it is not only the persons who get the glory, it is the ones who've done the work. And we all can go back in our family and see someone or a number of someones who resisted
Yes.
in spite of. There is a wonder that African people are on this planet, but it is because genetically and culturally we have resisted.
Yes.
All right.
Now, can I ask
Yeah.
Baba Ahmose, you know, we hear the words truth, justice, righteousness as a part of the fabric of African centeredness. However, there's also this dynamic to what we've also been accustomed to when it comes to, we say resistance or fighting off the lies or the attacks of anything that's not righteous, anything that is other than. Should we ever expect a place of peace and tranquility, or is it almost innate or inherent for us to be at war to some degree in order to achieve this justice and peace and righteousness? It's almost a question of, can you have one without the other, or is it just a constant?
That's a good question.
It is. It's a great question. There were no white folks before the 1500s.
Right.
There were no white skin-colored people before 3,000 years ago. There was thousands of years of governments on this planet, some of which were warring, but many of which were peaceful developments. The question is, and they used to ask Martin King, how long? Not long.
Okay.
So the question becomes, what emphasis do we put on teaching self-knowledge, and how does that reinforce? And as I was calling the roll, I should have called Brother Ausar in terms of resistance. But how long, how many generations, if that, will it take for that seed to grow and bear fruit? For if it's 1 today and 2 tomorrow and 4 the day after and 10 the day after, we will begin to see the growth and development of an African personality with consciousness, which then moves away from the need to prove to anybody that I am thug life.
Right.
Which is fake anyway.
It's fake anyway.
But what some of that, you tell the truth about this, some of that came about through the oppressor convincing
Yes.
those young folk
Yes.
that they would no longer be community protectors. When we look at who were the disciples and who were the Peace Stone Rangers, we
Yeah.
understood that they came into being to protect their community.
Right.
And that confusion
Yeah.
around other things was a counter to their objective. But I would think that if the time to work for peace, and you hit on it, the word is love, and I happen to fall upon a book or two about that.
Yes,
But
yes,
let me
yes,
say that
yes.
the answer is love, and love yourself, and love those who love you,
That's right.
and love those who don't love you, not to be abused, but what is this thing called love? Love is the answer to where we want to go once we know who we are.
That's right.
Because I am because you are.
That's right.
Yes. Absolutely.
Perfect love.
Perfect
Yes,
love.
yes.
Perfectibility.
Perfectibility. Amen.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That's
Thank
part,
you.
That's definitely part of that healing cycle also, isn't
Yeah.
Exactly. We get rid of the Ahmose
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Manganese. That's
Yeah.
right.
and the Ma'afa. We are in the Ma'afa.
Right.
We are in the Ahmose.
it? All right, what? You was
No. I mean, what he just said about we are in the my alpha and the my Manganese is so true. And I think that, when Baba, I really like when he was breaking down how, it's passed down genetically through the Europeans because, they had us in what they consider to be chattel slavery for over 300 and some years. That's a long time to pass down, not only the hatred, but just the mindset of the way to treat another people, right? So, I mean, it's powerful because it's kind of like brainwashing your own. The Europeans brainwashing their children to hate black people. And I think it's still at work today, as Baba just said, as far as the My Alpha and the Maangamizi, which the Maangamizi is deliberate and intentionally to destroy black people, Africans, our minds, our whole way of living. And I think that, when we really take a look at it, is we understand not only who we are, but I think it's just as important to understand who our enemies are, as Sun Tzu said.
And, yeah, that brings me to something because I heard Baba even spoke today, but we always speak on the original first person remains was found in Africa. Ethiopia, right? The original, the first woman. So the original people. So anyway, knowing that humanity begins in Africa, how can we challenge inferiority complex? And then how can we use that in that knowledge in places like the schools or just around our community?
I think we have to really challenge ourselves, and I think not only is it challenging the oppressors and challenging the system, but challenging ourselves, right? Because unfortunately, a lot of times, what do they say? If you can't beat them, join. I don't believe in that, right? Because that's a defeatist mentality, and that's what we can't have. That's why we have to stand firmly, and one of our, sayings is, I'm firmly established in the knowledge of self. So that's the key, to become firmly established. That way your foundation can't be shifted, right? And you're standing on something that's strong. So, I think that what's going on in society is an onrush of confusion and chaos that's thrown our way, and we can't panic. We have to just sometimes, we've talked about this before, take a step back and assess it, right? We have everything basically that we need, but it don't mean that we can't build on what our ancestors brought forward, right? And that we can't create, because when we understand our values, when we understand our principles, when we understand our ethics, one of the greatest things that we can do as African people is to add on to what has already been established, because we have the foundation. And so I think once we have the foundation and we come into the knowledge of self, and then we will be able to challenge that what's in front of us. But we can't challenge it if we don't have the knowledge of self, because it'll be like throwing, cotton balls at a window trying to break it. So I think that the knowledge of self is the key, as we always state. And I think that in order for us to truly challenge oppressive system, that we have to be connected collectively in a conscious manner.
I also think, Sankofa is, what are our roots? And whether you can go to Africa or not, before they rework it, I've been to Kemet a few times, and now they're trying to turn it into an amusement park because putting lights everywhere, and the idea is, I've been there with a number of groups and watched that transformation when you realize that we created the oldest stone building on the planet.
Wow.
We created the last of the 7 wonders of the world. And simply because the other people can't figure out how it was done, they decided that it had to be somebody from some other planet, or they decided that they had to figure out a way to take credit for its development, even to the point where we look at it as something that is untoward and not something to be proud of. And so the Sankofa says, if we go back and read the books on stone, whether we go there physically or not, but we spend time now with this misinformation machine, AI, and if we look at AI and they can show you these images if they're showing you the actual images, because some of that is false as well once you go there. So then you get a foundation that says, and the reason, you mentioned Kemet is because it's in stone. Everything else, not everything, many things have faded away or have been stolen and placed other places, and you never knew that they were on the continent. But the two things that they can't take away are the stones in Kemet and the oldest known group of people on the planet being the Kosan people.
That's true. That's so true. Well, I think it's also important that we refute the lie with true education. We have a lot of miseducation or misinformation, and I would like to see more of our scholars put the truth into places of learning, wherever that may be, because so often we send our children to these schools mandated. Our children are mandated to get on the bus, parents to push them off to school, and whatever they are taught, no one challenges. But here we are with the truth, and we don't bring that truth to the table to say, here's what we found, here's what it should be versus what you are teaching. But we're okay with our children being subjected to the literature, to the education, to the perception.
To prison.
Right. And they start our children with having an inferiority complex in just the way it's taught. So our children start history from enslavement, most of them. They don't start themselves from a place of intellectual competence.
Right.
Or, having the ability to build or architect or even astrology. And so from those facts alone, we see the highest dropout rate or lowest attendance amongst African American males in science. So once they get to, the first is the 9th grade where you have earth science, and then, you build on to biology. They never can get to chemistry. They never can get to anything that's higher than regular biology. However, they understand the chemistry of the streets. They understand how to put dope together. So, and can make a lot of money. But they don't teach us that we were the first anesthesiologists. We knew how to take plants and herbs and make healing potions or they never teach that is part of our genetic makeup. It's to understand these things. So you dropping out goes against the grain of who you really are. Again, all of these things we have to regather just like a garden and put our things back together because they've scattered. And that's one of the things that a war does. It dismantles, it disables, and it destabilizes. And that is what is worked on us constantly, is the destabilization of our mental health, in so much that we start believing those lies and it starts showing up in other areas. And I won't say lucky, it's in education, but once it goes into your healthcare, it goes into your, that cancer of the lies spreads so wide until we have a duty, a call to duty, to bring us back to the centeredness of just basic truth and education. And it's not that far away, I would think.
I like that, what you say about the miseducation of our youth, because that's really important. That's why I had said prison, because it's the school to prison pipeline. We basically just send our children off and think that they're in good hands, but they're not in good hands. Like Baba Ahmose said, the Mangamese, how they intentionally want to destroy us from an educational perspective, healthcare, economic, in all different forms, any type of oppression that they can basically put on us. Baba, because you had answered that beautifully when I spoke to you, asked you the question about, resistance in the African personality. Now, as far as dealing with the Department of Education, right, and I know that we can basically help our children on Saturdays like we do in other things, but what would you say are some key points that we can do to protect our children in these educational systems?
Well, I think that first of all, parents, mainly mothers, are the first teachers.
Right.
And so if we're going to spend resources, we certainly can spend resources on mothers. Secondly, I think that we have an organization that's available to retrain after they've been miseducated in the public school system. We can utilize our churches
Right.
if we have conscious ministers. Some of them are unconscious, so
That's right.
be careful. You can't not everybody can be trusted. It is not. I mean, churches, mosques, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The third piece is for me that your universities, especially your HBCUs, need to form coalitions
That's
Right.
right.
That's
That's
good.
good.
because they have the space on the weekends generally, because they usually don't have weekend classes because professors like to go home. But the space is available.
That's right.
I'll tell you, when I was at Delaware State, I put together a program called the Health Professions Academy. And these were middle school children, and they met on the weekend. And we brought in physicians and nurses, and it was organized. So, and we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, we started with $5,000. By the time we finished, and I was only doing it for 3 years, and then I retired, we got from the public health department $50,000. So you can run a program, and you don't need millions if
Right,
you have
that's
the
right.
if you have the cooperation of your schools, and so these HBCUs can work. The other thing that they can do is they can work with the high schools, the HBCUs. They can work with the high schools in their community, especially around your STEM programs.
Right, indeed.
They can set up. When my children were younger, they were in what was called a NASA program, and it was financed by NASA, and it was a science program, and so they would go on weekends to these classes. So you work with other agencies other than the Department of Education,
Right.
and if that agency is the Energy Department, here you do farming stuff. If you work with natural and wildlife, I mean, I am saying that you look out for the resources that are being utilized by other people with consciousness as the foundation, but as information as the resource that you get from them. And when I had this program, it dealt only with children of color.
Right.
Okay.
Indeed. Thank you.
Because they were considered, it was considered that there weren't that many African children going into the medical field. Right. So one of the ways to get them interested was to do it at the middle school level early on. Science the same way, all of that. So sometimes you utilize the resources of people who have not been aware that those resources can be used at a conscious level. The other piece is to provide an environment for children to come to learn.
Right.
If you have
Right.
a space.
That's right.
See, most of our children want to learn until they're told they can't learn.
Right.
Yeah.
I could tell you a personal story that when I was in junior high school, we called it middle school.
Right.
My counselor told me that I needed to learn a trade because I wasn't smart enough to go to college. Now, this sister, I figured she knew what she was talking about. So, I mean, I said, okay. I mean, you're the expert.
Right.
So I tell that quick story to say, be careful what you say to your children.
That's true.
Be careful what you allow other people to say to your children.
That's true.
Because life is not finished with them yet.
That's right.
And who knows what direction they'll go in simply off a statement in a counselor's office.
That's true. It's true.
And if I can, right quick,
Oh, that's
because I
good.
like that because, a lot of times labels are placed on our children.
Yes.
And Dr. Amos Wilson said that they even have a class teaching about labeling black children, right? And I think that unfortunately, they like to, plant that negative seed in the children's mind when they're young, thinking that they need extra attention, extra help. Sometimes they might, but I think it's the way that you word it, like what you just said, Baba. Be careful in what you say to a child, because even if a child do need extra help or whatever, it's a way to still encourage and inspire that child and give that child confidence.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Great statement. Cause we moving down to the last 5 minutes, but I do want to know. I want you to, Baba, break down. I had the words, man. I can't even.
Epistemology and axiology.
Right, epistemology.
I had
I think
him,
they knew where you were going, Brother Escents.
Brother Ausar been telling me he been telling me these words for the last few days.
Yes.
I had them, brother. I promise you, I did.
Well, I'll just wait till you say them. Then.
You're on blast.
Axiology and epistemology.
Exactly, brother.
Right. Can you break those down to us, and how African-centered epistemology and axiology help the African personality?
Oh, absolutely. Because it is our values and our knowledge that provides the foundation on which we build our personality. Axiology is how is an understanding of values, the study of values. And the 10 virtues will provide an excellent foundation, for, even though I didn't write that, but this is post that chapter. But axiology is, what are the values that you are being taught to determine your personality? What is the essentiality of moral social practice?
Right.
That is, what is the good that you learn to do, not because you get rewarded for it. You do good because the persons or people that you do good for need it. You simply do good because it is required of you as an African person, a human being. And when I say African person, I'm talking about all of the people on the planet, whether they understand they're African or not. Some of our African brothers and sisters need a little help, and we're going to help you.
Right.
And so I know we're running out of time. So the second question had to do with epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge and the ways of knowing, from science to intuitive knowing. But for African people, the most essential component of knowledge is intuitive knowing, because it is, in my opinion, spiritually based. How do you know something without knowing that you know it? How do you do something without
good.
knowing how to do it?
Yes.
How do you go where you can't go? How do you see what you can't see? And how do you hear what you can't hear?
That's good.
That's intuitive knowledge.
Yes.
How do you connect with those you're disconnected from? And as a parent or as a relative or as a friend, how do you know when somebody that you know needs you?
That's deep.
How do you listen to those inner voices? And how do you teach those who don't too?
That's good.
That's powerful.
Right, it is. And we got a couple more minutes.
Oh, well, let's...
brother. So yeah, so okay, African-centered epistemology. What did that look like in practice, and how do we decide what is true or who to trust or?
We had a brief discussion about how we decide who to trust and whether it's true, and it's more difficult now. And it is only our intuitive knowing, I think, that we can rely on. What is it about AI that is sending you a signal that this may not be true, whether it is or not? How do we learn to discern the truth? How do we get to the point where when we're in concert, in conversation with someone, that we are sharing the truth? I have this, I guess, practice where with significant people in my life, that we have a day of truth, a day of the macaroon, that you are not allowed to mislead, to ignore, to lie, so to speak, some other days you sort of could get by. I had this conversation when I went to the doctor's office earlier with the lady who worked there, and I told her, you need to practice telling one lie a day. So she said, "What?" I said, "Well, if you don't practice, how you gonna pull it off?"
Right.
Anyway, I tell you that later. So how do you tell the truth in a room full of liars? How do you tell the truth to get your mission accomplished?
That's good.
The point is that truth telling is what we do as part of our personality development. So the issue in terms of epistemology is not only intuitive knowing, but how do you measure whether something is real or not real?
That's right.
And when you do that measurement, how much faith do you place in it? How much faith do you place in it to determine what your next move is, what your next behavior will be? And that's important. And how do you stay in touch with your spirit? And when your spirit speaks to you, do you answer? And when the ancestors come to you, do you open the door, or do you say, "I'm afraid and I don't want to hear"? And they keep coming, and you miss the message. And sometimes, for me, they come in dreams.
Yes.
And then the dream has to be deciphered. But for some reason, I don't think they're allowed to tell me everything.
No.
They're just allowed to give me information because of this African thing called free will. You have the ability to make a choice whether it is Isfit or Ma'at.
That's good.
Brother, I would like to speak on that as far as epistemology, as far as how to know that what you're learning is basically true. And I get this from Dr. Murata Ashby when he say to make sure that you get a authentic, genuine, wise preceptor or jegna or mentor. I think that's important. And I think another way for us to really understand the concept of epistemology and gaining knowledge is we have, many of great men and women who have contributed to African history. We often talk about Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Asa Hillier, and we can go on and on and on. We have a history and we have a library full of great authors, historians, scholars, revolutionary warriors that have laid the path for us to follow. Malcolm X, for one, Dr. Martin Luther King. So I think that there's plenty of ways for us to learn the things that we need to learn. I think our ancestors have laid it out for us. It's just a matter of us saying, Kofa, going back, retrieving the knowledge, the information, building, adding on, and creating a brighter future for all African people.
That's good.
Well said.
Amen.
That was. And he answered another one of the questions that I did have. He answered it beautifully because we didn't have time to even ask the question. But all right, so Baba, if you had to leave our people with one piece of advice out of living out the African personality in this moment,